Today, the conservative purge continues. The Mandalorian star Gina Carano has been canceled by the left. Will it stick? We have got all the latest coming up, and it starts right now. Welcome to the news and why it matters. I'm Sarah Gonzalez, today joined by Stu Burgier and Pat Gray, both from BlazeTV.
Yeah.
Here. It's not Friday. I'm sure those who usually watch, they're like, what? Wait, it's Friday? No, it's not Friday. It's Pat and Stu Thursday now.
Yeah, we're ruining your week because now you think it's Friday.
Yeah.
And no, you still have another day.
You still have an extra day, which, by the way, here in Dallas it's not so fun to drive to work an extra day tomorrow because it's
brutal.
Yeah, it is really cold here. It's icy on the roads, but we're just here risking our lives for you.
Yeah, and if you're in Minnesota, it's kind of like summer.
Right. Summer in Minnesota. All right. So obviously, everyone is talking about the Gina Carano, the Mandalorian star from Disney Plus, canceled by Lucasfilm over just her horrendous, incendiary, inflammatory social media posts where she dared. Now, I will say, probably a stretch for anyone to compare Nazi Germany to anything going on now. I get it. However, both sides do it, and we will get into that. But really, they called her social media posts abhorrent and unacceptable because she criticized, she said conservatives were oppressed similarly to the oppression that the Jews faced in Nazi Germany.
But she didn't actually say that.
Right.
She doesn't actually say that in any of her posts.
And we'll get to that one later. We don't need to, so go ahead, please.
We're jumping ahead a little bit there because you're right, both sides do this.
Yeah.
But her post said basically like, regular citizens. It wasn't just Nazi soldiers beating up on Jews. It was regular citizens who turned against them, creating a culture of hatred toward one group was a big problem in Nazi Germany. And that's it. She kind of just leaves it there. I mean, she's like, what's the difference between that and hating someone for their political views? Mm-hmm. She doesn't actually say conservatives, though she's known to be kind of conservative. And
no, it says Jews were beaten in the streets, not by Nazi soldiers, but by their neighbors, even by children. Because history is edited, most people today don't realize that to get to the point where Nazi soldiers could easily round up thousands of Jews, the government first made their own neighbors hate them simply for being Jews. How is that any different from hating someone for their political views?
Yeah, I mean, it's not the entire picture of what happened in Nazi Germany. There's a lot of factors, but that was one of them. I mean, It was this, there was a view among regular Germans that Jews didn't really count as people. They could be canceled. They could be eliminated. They could have their livelihoods taken away from them whenever, because they were just Jews. That was the way they were seen. And that culture, that tide, allowed Nazi Germany to happen. Mm-hmm. It's not the only thing. It's certainly, I don't think she would claim that we are at that point here. We certainly are not. However, it is, you think about if you got a road, you're going down a road, and it splits into two. And you have to pick which way to go. One of them ends in Naziville. The other one ends anywhere else. You don't take 3 or 4 steps down the Naziville road, right? Stop. Turn around, come back, go the other way. Yeah. Always a good idea. I think it's something we should be on. We don't want to necessarily wait until we're in Naziville to say we shouldn't be in Naziville. When you get a couple steps down that road, turn around and come back. That's the only point I think she was making there. Yeah. What happens? She loses her job over it. She's now lost not only her job on The Mandalorian, but also a spin-off series that she was supposed to have as well. Multiple millions of dollars over what? Absolutely nothing. I mean, these are normal, somewhat tame posts on the internet, and because she happens to be someone who moderately is a Trump supporter, moderately skeptical over things like masks and stuff, she's been made into the ultimate enemy. You're not allowed to have these opinions in Hollywood. It really is amazing.
Yeah, Pat, United Talent Agency also dropped her as a client. So she's just, canceled by everyone. As Stu pointed out, this is not, I don't see the inflammatory rhetoric that should lead to her just losing her entire livelihood. Again, Nazi Germany, and I'm guilty of it as well. I think I've made a comparison or two to Nazi Germany, only not to say today is just like Nazi Germany, but to say, okay, I see the writing on the wall is a little bit similar to, so it's like, should we do that? Probably not. Is it worth losing your entire livelihood over?
No. And should we do it? Well, yeah, if it applies, I think we should.
Right.
But the word Nazi for the right is the second N word you can't say anymore.
Just for the right, though. I think that's a very
just for the right, qualifier. Because the left does it all the time. All the time. But for some reason, we're banned from any Nazi comparison. Well, how do you remember? How do you avoid what happened in the past, which we all said, never again. We'll never forget. So you have to talk about the steps that got you there in order to not forget and avoid that same scenario. It's pretty amazing. And she'll never work again. Who's going to hire her in Hollywood?
Yeah.
Nobody.
Yeah. It's hard to imagine a conservative who, like you, Glenn, everyone at this network, I think we've all been called Nazis, haven't we?
Oh, my gosh. Yeah.
I mean, I get called all the time on a regular basis by the left, and it's just totally fine.
No, and look, I mean, it's important to understand the unique horror of what Nazi Germany was. It's not completely unique. There were multiple societies at that time doing very similar things at larger scales. I mean, communist China and Russia, obviously, but they weren't even alone there. There have been other countries who have done terrible things like the Nazis have done. The reason why the Nazi thing comes up all the time, one, it's seen as the worst example, which, I think you can fairly say it's certainly right up there. One of the worst examples of societies that in any modern history. So it's the end of the road, right? Like if you say it's going to be a very restrictive society, and because it's the same restrictions that happened in name a country, like people would have to go, well, what's that country? It's also very well known as a reference, right? There were a lot of terrible things that happened, but they happened in slow steps. Not everyone noticed them at the time. So it's a very well understood analogy. It has, this used to happen to Glenn all the time when we were at Fox and stuff, because every time he'd say the word Nazi, the ADL would be out there criticizing him. Because anytime someone on the left says Nazi, they don't say anything. And like, you're right, like it is a unique horror. It needs to be remembered. But it's also like ridiculous to say that you can't bring it up unless you get to the point where people are going into gas chambers. At that point, it's too late.
Right.
You want to warn early over these things. And, separate from this, let's say the point is dumb. Let's say the point is absolutely insane. She's totally wrong. Nick Cannon is currently working at both CBS and Fox.
Just
after
rehired.
Saying Jews were evil rapists because they didn't have melanin. And they've rehired him at CBS. He never got fired from Fox.
Right.
It's so completely ridiculous. The double standard is so obvious. And the fact that they still try to claim, well, cancel culture isn't real. Of course it's real. It's 100% real. And, examples like this are really extreme ones. I mean, you talk about, there's some people who do say things that are really, really bad and do things that are really, really bad. And we all understand that a private company does not have to hire a particular actress if they don't like what she stands for. But this is she's not even really conservative, it doesn't seem. She just seems to be mildly skeptical and posting funny mask memes. And she gets fired from
that's alt-right these days.
A gigantic franchise and a spin-off series. For what? Not to mention, she's good on the show.
Yeah.
She is a really important part of the show. And, some of her co-stars who play very prominent roles, which I know we're going to discuss, I mean, they're behind helmets. You can replace them with anybody. You can't just replace her.
Okay, so then you guys will have, because I've seen a little bit of The Mandalorian, but I don't, usually when my husband decides to sit down and watch it, I'm just kind of laying on the couch scrolling my phone, not really paying attention. So I don't really know the storyline. I mean, I know she's a huge part, but I don't know this other guy. What's his name? Pascal?
Pedro.
Pedro Pascal. Okay, so
he is the main star.
He's the main Mandalorian. But
he's the
again,
Mandalorian.
He's the main guy. But again, if you've ever seen even when you're scrolling through your phone, you'll notice he's wearing a freaking
helmet. Got a helmet on.
Yeah, he does.
So you don't even know who he is. They could throw anybody back there, and you wouldn't even know.
Right.
But this guy doesn't get canceled for the same stuff, as you're going to point out.
Yes. So he tweeted out when was this? June 20th, 2018. He posted 2 images, for those of you who are listening on podcasts. One is of a concentration camp in Germany in 1944. Another is, of course, immigrant children in the cages that likely Obama and Biden built. I'd just like to point that out. That he, of course, hashtagged "This is America." So that's pretty, that's a pretty severe comparison to Nazi Germany.
And I like to point out, again, I'm not a guy who wants to make excuses for Obama and Biden, but I can guarantee they did not build those cages because those are Palestinian children.
Oh, were they?
Yes, they're not even Mexican children or border children in America. They were Palestinian children waiting for a soup kitchen in 2010.
Stop.
So literally every detail about this post is wrong. But again, does that mean that he gets fired? Absolutely not. He's totally fine. I mean, it really is amazing. If you have the right view, you keep your gig.
Yeah.
That's really, and there's this silent sort of process that goes on where people continually self-edit. I was listening to an interview with Barry Weiss recently, who was at the New York Times. She left kind of famously saying, I can't do this anymore. You guys won't even let ideas come through this place. And that's what she said. She said one of the biggest problems is not necessarily people like Gina Carano who will, publicly, or her, who publicly get in these big beefs with their employer and get fired or leave. It's what happens to when you're 23 years old and you're going in to be an actress, you're going in to be a journalist. You're going to self-edit. You're never going to say that you're a conservative because it's going to make you lose the job. So you're self-editing and you're essentially creating 2 versions of yourself, one for public consumption and one for private consumption. In your own home, in your own world, you're a conservative, but you never say those things. You never post them. There's never a conversation about these ideas. It becomes a society that can't speak. And that is, it's only a few steps down that road. We're not all the way to Naziville, but it is a scary, you didn't speak out against the Nazis.
Right.
I mean, that's at the end of the road. I'm not saying it's here, but it is a scary thing, and it's very antithetical to America.
Well, so if you're on the right, you get canceled and lose everything if you make a comparison to Nazi Germany. If you're on the left and you make the comparison, you apparently become president. In September 2020, Joe Biden actually was talking about President Trump and said Trump is sort of like Goebbels. Of course, you say, ish. You say the lie long enough, keep repeating it. It becomes common knowledge among voters. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez said the United States is running concentration camps on our southern border, and that is exactly what they are. They are concentration camps. It seems pretty clear what she was trying to say. She is, of course, in Congress, for those of you who missed it. So you've got a first 2 examples I'm going to give you right here. The sitting president and a congresswoman, both making direct comparisons to Nazi Germany. Totally fine.
I mean, to give another example, this impeachment trial going on right now, they're talking about how Trump was lying about the election results for months and months and months and months. And how are they referring to it every single time? The big lie. There's a reason they're calling it the big lie. The big lie is what they talked about with the Nazis, about how they lied about how bad Jews were, and there's all sorts of Holocaust references encapsulated in that phrase, and that's intentional. I mean, this happens all the freaking time, and you're right. Maybe we should be more precise and not use it every single time something bad happens. I think that's a good rule. But there are times it really does apply. And when you're silencing speech over half the population who can't even admit who they like as the president, that's a big violation of the principles of the United States.
Yeah, just a couple more. Don Lemon had something to say. I mean, obviously, I think Don Lemon has said probably far worse, too. But Cuomo called it a very extreme example. But Don Lemon said, it starts with little lies. It starts with little lies that become bigger lies and people who become brainwashed. And then he said, ask anybody who had a family member who had gone to the concentration camps. Joy Reid also, Jim Clyburn compared Trump's. Now, this is funny because this says, Clyburn compared Trump's refusal to concede to what Hitler did in Germany. And I'm like,
what?
He didn't lose.
He did. It's just like, what? So he said, I'm beginning to see what happened in Germany back in the 1930s. I never thought that could happen in this country. The list goes on. I mean, all of these people, many of them on this list, actually not just, reporters, newscasters, but like people who help run the country, making comparisons. Nothing happens to them. Do you think that her career is just gone?
Oh yeah.
I
can't imagine.
No semblance.
She's already lost everything but Disney. Is Paramount or Warner Brothers going to hire her now? No, all hell would break loose on them if they do.
Surely, though, the pendulum is going to swing back the other way, right? Because
Eventually
we can't like survive in society with everyone just getting canceled over like something that they say that really is not inflammatory, right? So,
well, a good example of that is Robert F. Kennedy, Jr. just was canceled from not his job, but from Instagram because he was talking about vaccines. So they're already starting to get caught up in that web, and the pendulum will swing back, and it'll swing back hard eventually.
Yeah. You know what? I was actually going to cover that later in the program. Let's talk about that after the break, because I think that is a very interesting conversation when we're talking about cancel culture. We've also got coming up after the break, James O'Keefe from Project Veritas. He also has been suspended, banned from Twitter. So the purge continues. We've got more to come after the break. Back in a minute. Before we get into Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who was canceled from, he had his account suspended from Instagram for sharing debunked vaccine claims. I do want to talk about, so you guys were talking off air, there is cancel Disney Plus is trending. There is a movement that obviously started by conservatives to try to gain some ground back in the, in Hollywood, in the TV and film world. Because obviously if you didn't, you would have nothing left to watch if you canceled everything that said that you don't have a right to exist, and that's basically all of Hollywood. So you basically would have nothing for nothing for you to watch, nothing for your children to watch. But do you think is it going to do anything? Canceling Disney Plus, even let's say even if a good chunk of conservatives, they actually follow through with it, they cancel it, they're not doing it anymore, they're not paying for it anymore. I don't know when it's going to be enough for, like we said earlier, the pendulum to swing back as far as these companies that are making money off of people and also literally hate them and wish that they didn't exist.
We actually canceled Netflix over the child.
That's right, the QBs.
Abuse thing. Yeah. Man, has that affected them? Oh, they're on their knees now. They are literally. I brought them to their knees. They don't have my $13.99 a month anymore. They don't have it, and they want it bad.
Yeah,
I heard that at a big board meeting. Like, where is
Where's Pat's $13.99? That only leaves us with $2.5 billion a month. Where's that extra $13.99? So it's I think it's kind of meanerless to them.
It's frustrating though, because then it's like, well, what do you do?
Yeah, I mean, there really isn't a great solution to this stuff. I think other than just trying to talk about it and expose it, I think that's important. It might make them hesitate occasionally. Maybe that's happened a few times. I think it happened with the social media. It worked for a while with some of these social media companies that weren't necessarily going crazy canceling, but now they've crossed that line and they're doing it. I'm not a believer in boycotts at all. Not only do I think they don't really work, I don't think that's a great thing for society. I think it works against a lot of the principles of capitalism and the way that we work together. I mean, capitalism really as a foundation was created out of an ability for two tribes that hated each other's guts to still be able to trade with each other, right? I mean, there has to be that sort of centralized exchange where you go into every restaurant and the cook probably is really liberal, right? But that doesn't mean you don't go to the restaurant. And I know people have their lines on this. My line is pretty extreme. I just boycotts. But I think there is some legitimately exciting movement going on in the idea that like people are starting to really realize this on the right. And for a long look, we built this company largely based on, look at the stars in this company, right? Like Glenn and Mark Levin and Steven Crowder and obviously us have big social media followings, right? That are all on these platforms. And so I think the conservatives have woken up to the point where they have to say, look, we really do need to essentially build this our own structure at this point, which is sad. But there's the guy who does the Convention of States project we've had on before. Then they're in the middle of working on something that he called the stack, which is basically beginning to end everything. That means web hosting. That means ISP. That means websites and streaming and original video players that go. There's multiple people working on that sort of stuff right now, and eventually, I do think that there has to be an outlet because right now you could build a pretty damn good media company with just the people who have been canceled out of Hollywood. Yeah. There's been a lot of them, and they're all kind of sitting at home not doing anything anymore. Eventually, you're going to have a pretty good roster of people. I do think that's, we've seen moves like with the Daily Wire releasing a movie recently. There's been some moves in that direction, but there's a lot of work to do. We're way behind.
Way more of it. Look what happened to Parlor. Parlor created an alternative to Twitter, and they lost because the server pulled them off. Amazon pulled them. Everybody was done with Parlor, and they're still down. It's been what, a month now?
Now they're back up as a site, right? But they're not.
Right, they're not.
There's no app.
There's no app.
Yeah. The app's not.
Which is a big deal.
The app may never come back.
Yeah.
I was just reading the other day. They might not be able to get it back.
It's possible.
It's amazing.
Yeah, no, it's not a good situation, and it shouldn't be the way that it happens.
Right.
And I think there has to be a point where conservatives are able to win the battle of ideas to say this is bad. And I think sometimes people do realize it. Like you see, some of this woke stuff I think is not connecting with people. I think people are saying, wait a minute, you want guys to race against women in high school sports, and beat them by 4 seconds, in a 100-meter dash like that? Is that you really want that? You want my daughter is now not going to be able to compete because you're letting some guy who's saying he's a woman? But there are elements of this that I think do connect with the American people outside of people who are watching BlazeTV. And those things, I think we need to win those battles, and we need to win them dramatically so that these companies see the benefit in not acting the way they are. Yeah. We're not going to, I don't think we can boycott Netflix out of business because other than Pat, obviously Pat can do it. But I don't think we're going to be able to do that successfully, but there has to be a change in the way people think about these things and get back to respecting free speech. Look, if we lose that battle, there's nothing to fight for.
Right.
We can win, we can keep a couple of accounts on social media, but we have to foundationally convince people early on in life through education and such that free speech is something worth fighting for. Right now, we've seen all these polls. Young people think oh gosh, well, if I think it's hateful, it just shouldn't be allowed. And it's like, well, wait a minute, this is the whole foundation of this society. Yeah. You are ripping up everything this country stands for, and they don't care. And the left has done a good job making it that way. We have to fight back against that.
Yeah. So James O'Keefe, Project Veritas Twitter account and his own personal Twitter account have been, I guess, as of the time of this taping, it was just kind of all unfolding. They don't know if it's permanently banned or if he's just suspended for right now. But coincidentally enough, this happened on Twitter right after his team dropped a post on Facebook. So they have this Facebook insider who's, you're talking about hate speech. The guy is apparently telling the mole or whatever, he's telling him, yeah, sometimes we have the ability, we can freeze comments whenever we think that there might be hate speech involved in these, in all of these posts, and, kind of going through their motives. So he releases that video and then all of a sudden gets taken off of Twitter. So not only that, as I think that goes directly to your point, but not only that, big alt-righter, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. big conservative alt-right. Total conservative right-wing nut job. Robert F. Kennedy Jr., as Pat shared, was banned from Instagram for sharing debunked vaccine claims. Maybe it's just me, but I feel like this, especially with the vaccine stuff, with all of the COVID vaccine, we don't have all that much information on it. It was rushed very quickly. it kind of makes you like a little bit more skeptical maybe of the things that he's sharing when they're so quick to shut down the information. Does it not, Pat?
Well, I think the American people are smart enough to figure it out for themselves. I don't think they have to be protected from RFK Jr.
But I mean, someone who maybe wouldn't have gone to go looking for information might go, well, why are they, you're not even going to let him talk? Like, now I want to see what he said.
Yeah.
And they might go looking for more information that they wouldn't have had they just let him keep his platform and say whatever he wants to say.
Well, I hope so, because the more information you have, the better it is for you to make a decision about it. But they're afraid. They're so afraid of losing their control over the American people that they can't allow contrasting points of view. I mean, I hear every day, I hear about another death from the vaccine. Well, I'm not going to just not take it because I heard that somebody died from it. First of all, tens of millions of people have already had the vaccine, and we've had, a smattering of deaths, and they don't even know if they're definitely attributed to the vaccine. But I'm still considering getting the vaccine. And so I think, what am I, the smartest person in America? No, I think we're all pretty capable of making that decision. We don't have to be protected from this stuff.
Yeah, I mean, and I think that's the key here, is that it's your decision to make. But if someone is saying you can't look at any other information other than what the government gives you, I mean, you kind of can see how that would lead to like not so great things happening.
Yeah, I mean, like probably no one disagrees with RFK Jr. more than me. Like I'm America's most pro-vaccine person. I want extra vaccines.
That's why, like, were you?
I've taken Moderna, Pfizer. I'm going Johnson & Johnson, AstraZeneca. I'm getting them all. And also, like, one of my pet issues is the global warming thing, which he is probably the most insane person in America when it comes to global warming. Like, I don't know that there's anyone worse than RFK Jr.
So he's kind of like your arch nemesis.
He kind of is in a way. But also, like, there's a thing called the curiosity gap that's utilized on all of us online all the time, which is like those little like there'd be a picture of a girl like about to fall into something and be like, you're not going to believe what happened next, and like you're like, oh, I gotta click. The click. It's kind of like a clickbait. It's a curiosity gap, and they write headlines that way, right? To say they want you to read a headline and say, well, I want the answer to that. What information am I missing? And so you click on it, and it's like that's what this does. Like, wait a minute, he got banned. Why did he get banned? What's he saying that's so bad? I'm going to go find that information out. How do I get that information? People hunt it more because you take it away from them. I do think there is an ability. I think more information I think is better. I'm a total free speech absolutist on this stuff. I don't care. Like, I might totally disagree with every single one of his opinions, but to take away,
shouldn't be banned.
It shouldn't be banned. It's silly, and not only do I think it's morally wrong to limit someone's speech like that, it's also just not effective. I don't think it's effective. They could probably point to, I think they could probably disagree with me on that point. They'll say we banned Alex Jones, and when's the last time you heard anything from Alex Jones? I can't remember any. It's been a year since I've heard Alex Jones speak. It is effective at some point in limiting people's voices. But that being said, like, people are going to find the information if they're susceptible to these things. And, people are going to go out and search it out. When you create that curiosity, people are going to want to find it. And if it's not RFK Jr., it's going to be somebody else. You're not going to be able to stop it all.
All right, we got more to come. Back in a minute.
I don't, like, I understand don't claim that this is something.
Critics are slamming President Biden today over a report that his administration is considering implementing domestic travel restrictions on Florida. It's just so happens to be that one state with that really badass governor that doesn't care what the federal government is telling him. He's going to run the state the way he wants to run the state, and doing it fairly successfully, I would say. Stu, I know you're the stats guy. Is that a fair thing to say as far as comparing Florida to the other larger states in the country?
Yeah, I mean, as a man who just very recently, just 2 or 3 days ago, traveled from Florida.
There.
Yeah, I was in Florida. And Florida is it's interesting because I think we've all talked about this separately at one point or another, in that like there's been a lot of people who have been getting some attention as maybe a 2024 possibility, and we've all said, I think, like, isn't DeSantis the guy kind of like right now? Shouldn't he be one of the people we're really considering, because he's had pretty good results in Florida and he's run it with a sort of a freedom lean, and only recently have I seen that bubble up. Now it seems like he's becoming, wait a minute, here's a guy who's running one of the biggest states with tons and tons of old people that got hit with coronavirus, but like is performing statistically, as you point out, much better than states like California or New York. And, I was just there. It's very similar to here. I mean, it's not like on a day-to-day basis, there is a mask mandate in Texas and not in Florida. But like day-to-day life, you're going in which
is bull crap,
I know.
Governor Abbott.
I know. And I know this Sarah really hates it. Chad Prather really hates it. My wife really hates it. But I will say it doesn't feel any different. I mean, in Florida, there's all these pictures that came out for the Super Bowl afterwards where people are outside and they were partying and they didn't have masks on. Well, the same thing would happen in Texas. Like outside, you're not going to get masks outside. You go into buildings, people are generally wearing masks. I mean, the overwhelming majority, but not everybody. It's what I would say is like both Texas and Florida and many red states, South Dakota, have this like lean towards freedom. When they've had the option of whether we have a new mandate or not, most of the time, with the Texas exception noted, they've leaned towards freedom and let people make their own decisions. And the result of that has been to outperform New York and California and many other blue states that have had much higher restrictions, Connecticut, New Jersey, Massachusetts. They've shown incredible results. And there are a lot of factors that go into this. A lot of these red states are in the South, and there's weather, and there's, I think there's a lot of stuff happening in New York City, for example, where there's so much mask shaming, and there's so much shaming of doing anything in the group that people, when they decide, because they're freaking human beings, they want to have some interaction, they're doing it in their dinky 1940s apartments that are 400 square feet, because they want to hide it from everyone. Yeah. So they're actually spreading it worse. Yeah. Instead of us, we're going out to parks. Right. There's a lot of things that happen like that. But just Florida has been a star here. And the fact that they're going after Florida with travel restrictions, to me, tells me they are now seeing Ron DeSantis as a 2024 threat. This is their announcement of it. Yeah, I mean, you can't imagine that this is anything but politically motivated.
I don't imagine that. Not only can't I don't. Yeah. But I'm like Stu, so tired of the mask thing. It's asinine. Can we please move past? Fauci was just telling us, was it earlier this week, that get used to the mask thing, because we're not going to be able to even look at maybe not doing the masks until late fall of this year or going into winter. No. No. I'm sorry. No. The answer is no. I mean, look, I'm just not going to do that.
Again, if these numbers go down, the red states are all going to lift this stuff, right? Yeah. I mean, but
when? Though, because you say that, but our own Texas, of all freaking places, Texas, our own governor has not given us any metrics to go by. He has not said, well, when we hit this number, then we'll get rid of the masks. Nothing.
I would also note that he hasn't actually fined anyone. I don't think this has been enforced in any way.
Okay,
but it does trickle down. It does trickle down.
And it puts pressure on all of these businesses who feel like they have to enforce it or they're going to get in trouble because they don't know any better.
And it creates a thing in people's minds that, you're not wearing a mask.
I mean, my gosh, I get looked at like I'm killing everyone's grandmas when I walk into a Target and I'm not wearing a damn mask.
Yeah, I don't think there's much separation between a state like this and Florida on that point, though. That stuff still happens because liberals live in these states too, right? Yeah. I mean, it's more of an individual thing, honestly.
But the pressure that's put on businesses did you see the same in Florida?
Every business has got that sign in the window. Now, it's the same thing. Like now, you walk in there. My wife walks into every store here in Texas without a mask.
Yeah, me too.
She hates them.
Yeah. Did they ever tell her to?
Every once in a while, yes. They say, "Can you put a mask on?" And she, generally speaking, will. I would say she she'll act tough on it. I think she typically, like if she has to go into the place, she'll do it. If she has a choice between a place that will let her go in without the mask and one that won't, she will pick the one that will let her go in without it. But, you know, again, in certain situations, she needs to be in a certain place. She goes along with it.
Yeah, I mean, if I'm going to the hospital, I'm not going to like pitch a fit. I need to get in there. I'll put the mask on for that, but not.
But at the grocery store, you don't wear one?
Absolutely not.
Yeah.
And I've not been told.
And but this is what I'm talking about. You're talking about a state with a mask mandate.
Yeah.
And generally speaking, they're not going to say much of anything. I mean, my wife has talked to a couple people who worked, some of her, you know, she's on Instagram and she's always communicating with the people on our feed. And a couple of them worked at, like, I think it was a big box store, let's put it that way, because I don't remember exactly which one it was. But they said their official behind the scenes policy is, if someone comes in without a mask, say, hey, would you like to wear a mask? If they say no, don't create a conflict. Let them go do their thing. Because, you know, like, it's not their job. They're not the police.
Well, there were altercations at the beginning of this. There were altercations at a lot of retail stores. And so a lot of them got policies. It's like, all right, like, have the sign and maybe ask them, but don't bother them after that.
It's a sensible policy. And, you know, like, and there's most people are going to be like, I think Pat and I are, which is like, I don't want to get in let alone an argument, but a conversation with anyone at a store. I don't want to talk to you in any way. So I'm just going to throw the thing on so I can just hide and then never. I don't want to deal with it. But I mean, you know, at some point we are still higher than the first or second peak of this. Like, we're coming down in a really good, fast way, which is great. I think when this thing bottoms out, I think there's a good chance this stuff gets lifted, especially if we're further along on the vaccine. I think at some point, whether the vaccine works or not, we all recognize there's a chance we have to go back to normal society here at some point.
Do we all recognize that, though?
I mean, I think at least half the country recognizes that. Maybe we'll just be like you know, Asian countries that wear masks all the time. I don't know. I don't think that's gonna hit that well with Americans. And I do think that, like, when you get red states, when these we're still having, you know, 3,000 people a day. Remember, the peak of that first wave was about 2,000 people a day. We're still at 3,000 now. So, like, we're coming down the right side of the mountain.
Yeah, it's down 55%, isn't it?
It was at about 4,000 at its peak. In this last wave, and that's just because it's been spread out really more around the country than it was pockets initially. But anyway, the bottom line is, like, I think when this comes down, we're probably about 30% of the people have already had it, like myself, a COVID-19 survivor, we're at about 12 or 15% now or so that have had at least the first shot of the vaccine. You get that number around 50 or 60%. They're just going to these numbers are going to crash, and you know, then.
And then we're going to have a whole new generation of people growing third arms.
Yes, well, that's true. But again, like, a third arm would be helpful. You know, like, think about just playing basketball, for example. You can kind of push off as you're taking a shot. There's lots of benefits there.
We got to take a break. Back in a minute.
That's what they censored from RFK Jr.
I know.
He was exposing the third arm, and no one will let him do it.
They don't want you to know. White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki. Do you guys say Saki?
Saki.
I say saki.
Saki?
I say saki. Like the drink at Japanese restaurants.
Literally everyone I talk to says it differently.
It's not.
Really?
It's definitely not Pasaki.
I hear people say it.
Glenn says Pasaki.
Psaki. Well, she is defending President Biden's, which still I hate saying it, President Biden. I can't even say it. His executive order demanding schools permit transgender students to be able to participate in sports just based on their preferred gender identity. Here is Saki defending trans athletes competing in girls' sports. Watch.
To college scholarships. Is there any kind of messaging or clarification that the White House wants to give on the executive order?
I would just say that the president's belief is that trans rights are human rights, and that's why he signed that executive order.
Bumper sticker.
In terms of the determinations by universities and colleges, I certainly defer to them.
Wow, that is groundbreaking.
And we're following the science, of course. We're following the science again, right? Because they're big science followers, so we know that they've looked into the science of men competing against women, and they realize that women can blow away men in any athletic competition. They can, because the muscle structure is exactly the same.
Totally the same.
Because we're following the science. They could both have periods. They could both have babies. babies. Let's follow the science on this trans issue. It's great.
Well, that is a great point because it is chest feeding now and birthing
chest milk.
parent.
Right?
Yes, chest milk.
Oh,
yes.
gosh.
Well, and
Chest milk.
I also.
I dare you to extract milk from my chest. I dare.
Can you milk me?
Dare anyone.
Will that not go well?
No, it won't. No.
I also love the groundbreaking revelation that trans rights are human rights.
Oh, what a wonderful bumper sticker.
Yeah.
You got to love when you can answer something with a bumper. Trans rights are human rights.
But women's rights are apparently not human rights
No.
anymore.
No. What's also interesting is that, let's just say, for example, let's go down the Saki road here for a second, and trans rights are human rights. Why at the end then is she leaving it up to individual colleges? I thought these were human rights.
That's a great point.
Why are you leaving it up to individual? Shouldn't you be forcing, I don't want to tempt them, but shouldn't you be forcing shouldn't all men only participate in women's sports and only women should participate in men's sports? We'll just switch the names and then we can have good leagues again. This is the type of thing, I mentioned it either earlier though, that I think is just obviously ridiculous to regular people that don't follow this like we do, Like we can say the woke stuff and intersectionality and we can have all these conversations about this. This stuff is just like, wait a minute, what? Like my kid got the silver medal in the track meet because a dude was running against my daughter? Like what? That sort of stuff is so, I think, offensive to people. In some ways, it's good they go down these roads because giving these like black and white obvious examples of unfairness and ridiculous ends to their dumb arguments, I think helps drive this stuff home with the average person who, maybe doesn't get into the academic side of these arguments as well. This is just obviously offensive to, I think, the normal person.
Yeah, Pat, you mentioned women. Do you think, are women on the left, are they going to wake up at any point in time that the left actually really does not care about them at all?
Man, I don't know. There are women, there are girls, teen girls, college girls who have been complaining really vociferously a lot. They've been vociferously. They've been complaining about it because they're losing scholarships and they're losing competitions that they've trained their whole lives for. And now they're competing against actual men. So will they be listened to? I don't know.
It's hard to, it's hard for me because you hear this stuff and you know, as a suburban mom, I'm the suburban mom at the table, right? You hear this stuff and then you saw all of these cities burning, around the country. And it's just hard for me to imagine how a mom, a woman, someone who sees how the left is disregarding their family's safety, disregarding women entirely. It's just so hard for me to wrap my head around how they could possibly then turn around and vote for that party. I guess we'll see how all of that plays out. All right, we got to take a break. Back in a minute.
The only time they care about women is when to give them the right to abort their kids.
Right.
Outside of that, they don't care.
Right. Hey, don't forget, if you are watching this on BlazeTV, YouTube, Facebook, wherever you are watching this broadcast, make sure to go to wherever you get your audio podcasts and subscribe, rate, and review the podcast. It will help other people find this show so that they can listen to it as well. You also might see your review read live on air. We've got Cyro for Life, Cyrus. He says, hey, my name is Cyrus. I'm a conservative. I voted for Trump. I just started listening to your show. I'm very impressed. It's good content. The show has made me want to make my own YouTube content to give my own perspective because being a kid from Chicago, you are called a sellout if you can think for yourself and have a different perspective. Thank you for opening my eyes. That's true, Cyrus. And
poor kid's got a long life of that ahead of him of that treatment.
Yeah, it's not getting better. So good for you though for creating your own YouTube and speaking out because that's the only way we're gonna change the tides. All right, Cust 2525. You guys, y'all's names crack me up. Like, I don't know what any of that means, but thank you for the 5 stars. Great show. You are covering what I want to hear about. Keep up the good work. So thank you guys for that. I know we also have many people who review it and they're like, Pat and Stu are the best.
Yep,
Pat and Stu are my favorite combo.
Yeah, there's a lot of geniuses watching.
Really?
Yeah.
Very smart audience.
Wow. But I didn't hear you say that until I just told you that
they were pretty.
No, we've always said that. We first started talking about that in the late 40s.
Did you?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Wow, that's
how
incredible.
smart this audience
Storming the
is.
beaches.
Yeah, remember that?
Oh, yeah. You're like, by the way, that show in about
that we're going to do.
Years is gonna
smartest
be,
audience of all time.
Oh, wow. Really smart audience.
Really good.
Fighting for America and talking about reviews.